Okay, 7th grade, we're going to talk very briefly about ACE page 18, number 7. This situation said the students in Miss Chang's class decide to order water bottles that advertise the walkathon. Hyun obtains 2 different quotes for the cost of the bottles. So we have Fill It Up Inc. and we have Bottles by Bob company. Fill It Up Inc. charges $4 for every bottle that you buy. So if we were going to purchase bottles, we would know that if I was buying 1 bottle, it would be $4, 2 bottles would be $8, 3 bottles would be $12, and so on and so on. So every bottle you increase, the price goes up by $4. Bottles by Bob is a little bit different. So before you purchase any bottles, some companies charge something called a setup fee. And a lot of times a setup fee in manufacturing is basically like setting up the machines to print out, in this case, a water bottle that would have your personal message on it or your personal logo. So Bottles by Bob is going to charge us $25 before we start adding on any bottles. So at 0 bottles, we're going to have a $25 setup fee. On top of that $25 fee, they're going to charge us $3 per bottle. So we have the rate happening here, plus we have an additional cost that we would add on to the rate. So what do these equations look like? Because they had asked you from the get-go to come up with equations for Fill It Up and for Bottles by Bob. So I'm going to walk through just kind of how you would do that without any data table, without any graph, because they ask you to graph it a little bit later. So we've talked a lot about equations in the last investigations, the last 3 investigations. And all of our equations can take this form. So the dependent variable is equal to some sort of rate times the independent variable plus or minus, in this case plus, a starting point. So this pink box is always going to be your change in y over your change in x. In this case, I have made C, the cost, the dependent variable. So I'm actually going to write that there. So C is going to be dependent, because we know the cost, the final cost is going to depend on how many bottles we buy. So that's how I know that C is dependent in this case, which means that N is going to be independent, and N is my number of bottles that I'm buying. So C is the cost, N is the number of bottles. So my equation would essentially look like C is equal to some value times the number of bottles plus some sort of initial fee or initial starting point. All right, so if I use that equation for Fill It Up, Fill It Up actually is pink down here, so I'm going to stick with pink. So I'm going to have C is equal to some sort of rate multiplied by the number of bottles plus a starting point. So Fill It Up, where do I start? So when I have 0 bottles, I don't pay any money. So I can think to myself here, okay, that is going to be really 0. So I start with $0. No bottles, no money. So I don't have to pay anything if I don't buy any bottles. The minute I start buying bottles, they're going to charge me $4 per bottle. If I take $4 per bottle and multiply it by the number of bottles, that should give me my final cost. So I have 4 input here. This is my my change in y over change in x. And if I wanted to make, and I put it as a hint in the section, if I wanted to make a quick data table, I would have the number of bottles and I'd have my final cost. I'd know that for 0 bottles, I paid $0. For 1 bottle, $4. 2 bottles, $8, 3 bottles, $12, and so on. So that pattern would continue. I'm going to move over a little bit here. That pattern would keep continuing. So this would be my starting point here. I'm going to get a highlighter. So this right here would tell me what goes into this spot. And then we've seen these little sideways carrots here. I add 4, add 4, add 4, add 4. Every time my number of bottles goes up by 1. So my change in Y over change in X is going to be 4, because C is the Y value, over 1, which is the X value, which is really just $4. So we put the 4 up there. Since I don't pay anything at the start, I don't have to include that in my equation. So my final equation here for fill it up is going to be the cost is equal to 4 times the number of bottles. So let's go to Bottles by Bob. Bottles by Bob has 2 things happening here. So if I use that equation, C is equal to some value times N plus a starting point. Well, we know that Bottles by Bob has a $25 setup fee, so that ends up being my starting point. So here, again, it did not ask you for a data table, but I did suggest it to have it make a little bit more sense. If I buy 0 bottles, it does not matter if I haven't purchased a bottle yet. I have to pay a $25 setup fee before my bottles start to accumulate. So that 25 is going to go right in here. So $25 to start with. And then what is my rate of change? So 1 bottle, I'm going to pay the $25 plus 3 more dollars. So $3 per bottle. So I've got $3, but I have to add on that $25 setup fee. So that's going to be $28. 2 bottles is going to be $31. That's another $3 increase. 3 bottles is going to be $34. That's another $3 increase, and so on. So every time my bottles go up by 1, my cost is going up by $3. The only thing that has changed here is my starting point. So here I have the 25 is my starting point, and then this value is going to be $3 because my change in Y over change in X is equal to $3 to 1 bottle. $3 or $3 per 1 bottle. So I can put that over there. This is my final equation. That's it. I don't have to simplify anything. Let's do that. So I don't have to simplify anything. That is the equation. C equals 3n plus 25. You could have also written C equals 25 plus 3n. That doesn't change anything. Commutative property says that we can flip-flop those as long as the signs get flipped with them. All right, let's take a look at the graph. So I believe I suggested, because they didn't give any suggestions for this, but I suggested that you go up by 5s, at least by 5s. When I was starting to do this, you know, as I went through, basically what they want to do is they start to ask you, first and foremost, what's the independent, what's the dependent? We've already gone over that. My independent variable goes on the x-axis. My dependent goes on the y-axis. But when you get to C and D, they say, from which company do you think this class should buy water bottles? What factors influence your decision? Basically, you have to come to a point here where the lines start to cross. You'll notice that as you start to make your points, right? So I did every 10. So 10 bottles for fill it up. I could go to my equation. 4 times 10 is going to be 40. So I plotted a point at, for 10 bottles, it's $40. For the other company, Bottles by Bob, 10 bottles. So I've got 10 bottles times the $3. That's $30 plus the $25. That gives me $55 for 10. And then I just follow those patterns. So we know that Bob's Bottling Company is going to start at $25, and then every 10 or every one bottle, it's going to go up by $3. It was just a little bit easier to go up by 5s or 10s here because to plot all the way up to like 30 or 40 bottles would have been a lot. So as you draw your lines, so my pink line represents fill it up. It looks like fill it up is the way to go up until they intersect. So when the lines intersect, that kind of tells you where the cost will be the same. So I put a little point. So this was a point that I actually did not plot in mine. I think I had suggested for you guys to go up by 5s, so you probably did plot it. If I come down from there, I can see, so I went up by 2, so this is 20, 22, 24, 26. So right here, I am at 25 bottles. So at 25 bottles, both companies have a cost of $100. So 25 bottles would give them both a cost of $100. Anything below 25 bottles, you'll see that fill it up is the better choice because their prices are lower. Any amount of bottles after 25, Bottles by Bob, I didn't mark it, that's why so this is Bottles by Bob. I'll repeat that. So any amount of bottles up to 25, you're going to want to go with fill it up because the cost is less. If the school is buying more than 25 bottles, which I'm sure they are because there's lots of students that they're buying bottles of water for, you're going to want to go with Bottles by Bob because they end up being a lower cost after you pass that 25 bottle point. So you pay more for Bottles by Bob in the beginning because you got the $25 setup fee, but eventually when you keep buying bottles and keep buying bottles, they'll end up being cheaper the more bottles that you buy. So 25 bottles are $100 for both companies, but beyond that, Bottles by Bob is cheaper. Fill it up will continue to get more and more expensive. So that's kind of how you would have explained C and D for that. All right, if you have any questions, let me know. And that wraps it up for right now. See you soon. Bye-bye.